Greetings, Brother Judah, a member of the Congregation of Israel, a representative of the NMP, the Nazarene Messianic Party. And I'm here to have another discussion, another discussion on the Bible and politics. We approach the Bible at the NMP from a socio-political or geopolitical perspective. And we argue this is the correct way to approach the scriptures because it deals with societies, kingdoms, nations, governments. And we argue to get a well-rounded understanding of the text is to study the world. And therefore that includes studying politics. I want to go into a discussion about old-time religion. Sumer. We have been working our way technically backwards. We started to look into Egypt and its social, political, and religious dogmas. And we're going to work our way back to Sumer, the most ancient, some will argue, post-flood civilization. If you would, just bear with me a moment, please. All right, thank you. So we want to begin to investigate this and make sense of this. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So yeah, we want to begin to look at the culture of Sumer. And as I was saying before in the first sessions, it's important for us to remember what religion is. And this time I'm dealing with religion in the true definition of the word. Sometimes when I make comments about religion, I am talking about the superstition and the rituals of modern day assemblies. But today, as I have been doing in this discussion on old time religion, I've been going into the real definition. The etymology of it is to bind. So when we're looking at this, we understand that the idea of religion is a system of beliefs that hold and binds people together. So the definition out of the Merriam-Webster's dictionary is a cause, a principle, or system of beliefs held to with ardor and faith. Even scrupulous conformity. You're really dedicated and you really believe whatever that system of beliefs may be, you hold it with high regard. So when we're looking at religion, we want to understand it's just simply a system of beliefs and principles. And so we had found previously that the system of beliefs of empire, class systems, caste systems, social stratification, these are all system of beliefs. There's a system of belief that bring about that type of society. I had made a comment that Egypt, there was a civilization even more ancient than Egypt. And this would be Sumer. So with that being said, we're going to investigate a couple of things pertaining to Sumer. Now, again, I'm sorry. Bear with me one moment, please. Okay. So it's some things that we want to begin with almost immediately out of the Hebrew Bible. And what we find post flood, and sometimes it's necessary to work backwards, but what we find post flood is the rise of a civilization coming from the descendants of Noah. What we find pre flood, where the knowledges originated for the post flood civilization, were men highly advanced and skilled in knowledges and sciences. You had the knowledges that was melting of brass, making instruments. Even it led into making weapons. Noah himself was highly advanced and skilled, where he was a builder and built the ark. So we work our way back to that civilization, which was highly advanced. But right now we're going to Sumer. Sumer would be the post flood. What we got to find out is something that happened, which we call, or which I argue, is the Great Rebellion. The Great Rebellion took place where men began to rebel against the oracle of the Creator. Now, since we deal with the Bible from a social political perspective, our approach here is to show you that to serve the Creator is inextricably tied into geopolitical and economic basis. Economics and the idea of distribution of goods and resources. That's why he made the earth, for the equitable distribution of goods and resources. But he created man to build a society. And this society is to be built upon justice and equity. We're going to bring this in with the children of Israel, as we attempted to bring in previously with our last discussion. We're going to bring them in again. But first, we're going to go back to Sumer. And once we understand the children of Israel not as a religious group in the sense of Western religion today, but understand the children of Israel as a social principle. They are the social group that is to renovate the world from the religion and the system of beliefs that started from Cain, made his way past the flood, and began to proliferate with the order of Nimrod. Now we go back to Genesis chapter 10. In Genesis chapter 10, we're going to find something as well. We're going to see the beginning of the Great Rebellion, where the people's system of beliefs began to go against the order in which Noah was instructed. Because remember, he was a righteous man. And so understanding righteous from the social political perspective, if you look it up in the Hebrew, it means one who is I'm paraphrasing, but one who administers justice, verdicts of justice. So there we have Zadik, verdict of justice. So Noah was a man of justice. And all of this, I believe, makes sense as we analyze the biblical narrative from a social political perspective. And also, this will allow us to understand the religion of whom the Hebrew calls Satan, the adverse force that goes against this social political order in which the Creator have ordained for man from the beginning. All right. So the system of beliefs of the Creator was rebelled against. Now, Genesis chapter 10, starting at verse 6, begins to explain to us about the coming of the children of Ham and the empires that arose out of Noah's son Ham. And it reads as follows: and the sons of Ham, Cush, or in other words, the black-headed ones. This term black-headed ones are used in different contexts. The Sumerians who began to establish the land from the first king, whom we understand as Nimrod, but I've been led to believe and I've been taught that Nimrod isn't just that one man, but Nimrod is like an order, almost like you will find in the Hebrew Bible about Abimelech, you see. So it was more than just one Abimelech. So when we're looking at Nimrod, we're looking at the rebels, the mighty, the Gabor, okay? And they're just not mighty in the sense of might in the name of the Creator. They're rebels. And so we have to see how they rebelled. What did they do? And therefore, this entails analyzing their religion. Now, we see here that Ham, the sons of Ham, we have Cush, which would be so-called Ethiopia, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan. Verse 7 reads, and the sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, and Sabata, and Reamah, and Sabteka, and the sons of Reamah, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begot Nimrod. And that's the rebel. He was Gabor, or mighty. Look what it says here. Cush begot Nimrod. I didn't say how old Cush was when he begot Nimrod. I didn't give any ages. Right now, it's not even telling you how old he or even Ham was and how old Cush was when they died and stuff like that. So they was living for some time. And eventually Cush begot Nimrod. And Nimrod, he began to be a mighty one in the earth. So as we continue this discussion, we're going to find the kings that began to be established in Sumer. All right, but that's later on. First, we just have to build some groundwork here. And what we have, and I'm gonna make it clear, so just some people. I don't know who's all on with us, but we don't approach this from lizard people, literal lizard people, and people coming out of space and aliens on another planet. From my research of the Anunnaki and the Igigi, they didn't come from another planet. But I've seen the same type of myth and misunderstanding happen when people discuss the book of the initiated, the literary work in whom the Hebrew calls the writings of Enoch. But again, we're not into all of that stuff. What we approach the Bible scientifically. And so if you think we're about to talk about some aliens from another planet, no, we don't really have that kind of entertainment going on here. What we're doing is we're going to do some research and show you that the ancients spoke a certain language. It's important to understand their language. And there we can begin to understand the mysteries and what their language, their anthropomorphisms, and what it all represented. Okay. And also take this in context too, is that we're going to find that this is the establishing of Babel. So what you will find when you try to research these things is not really coherent. Different city states are going to amalgamate, take away, add, change names. They're going to have various roles of the different deities. One time under one nation state is Anu, then later on is Gilgamesh, or should I say Marduk, because we're looking at Babel. Okay. And there's something happened that's going to explain why it's so difficult for people to put all of this together. You have to deal with it by city state for the most part. And you have to look at the basic principle. But the Bible explains why this happened, because he confounded the language. So therefore, they had different ideas. They had different thoughts and understandings which divided them. And therefore, it broke off into nation states. Sumer eventually broke off into nation states. There's an explanation for all of this when we study society. It's not it's not hocus pocus. Okay. So therefore, we're going to take our time. We're going to go all, like I said, we're going back to Sumer, and then we're going to look at the nation states of Shinar briefly. But we want to establish some points. So far, we see Nimrod. It means to rebel, the rebel. And he began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And we explain this in our law readings, and we go into history and show you after the flood and men and animals, there was an antagonism between them. And history have shown that as nations begin to stratify and begin to have class or hierarchy, probably more appropriately, then the ones who defended the people, they eventually escalated to secure the seat of a tyrannical ruler. But we deal with that as well. But I just want you to be with me today and give us a benefit of the doubt and take it into consideration what we're presenting. And right now we're looking at Nimrod. He was a mighty hunter. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Jehovah. Now notice very carefully in verse 10. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. It doesn't tell us how long Nimrod lived. It doesn't tell us how long or how old he was when he first began to establish. We're going to find some of this out when we study more of the kings of Sumer. But I also want you to remember that Nimrod it may be a mistake to just look at him only as one person and not as an order or of people and kings who follow his same pattern. Namely, the kings that rose up, the mighty kings that rose up in Sumer, establishing the very first civilization. They're not aliens. They didn't come from another planet. They came from, you can say their knowledges came from another world. And I know some people, they may, Brother Judah, what you talking about? Yes, the world, not another planet, but their knowledges came from the world, which was pre-flood. And that's what I was explaining of the intelligence and the sciences that was revealed in the first world. That world was destroyed, but that those knowledges was brought over by Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth and their wives. Okay. So not another planet. No, not another planet. These are men. And we're going to show you some other things to prove this point. The beginning of his kingdom. Didn't say how old he was, nor how long he lived in the Hebrew text, was Babel. And Babel is the gate of the gods, but it also represents confusion. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, and Akkad, and Kelna in the land of Shinar. Out of that land, or it is written also, and he went out into Assyria. It depends on what text you're reading. So in other words, out of that land, or what's coming forth next, is Syria, or Assyria, excuse me. Here is called Asher. And Nineveh was built, and the city Rehoboth and Kelna and Rezin between Nineveh and Kelna. The same is a great city. So what we find here, the biblical text is revealing to us that city-states were being established. Okay. And then the history and the archaeology of Sumer will show that there were kings who followed the same order of the land of Nimrod. Micah talks about the land of Nimrod. So we're talking about the land of the rebels. We're going to find out also about the Igigi and the Anunnaki shortly. Now, Nimrod and the order of Nimrod began to establish civilization. How do we know that? Because civilization is derived from city. Nimrod was building mighty cities, all after his order, all of the mighty kings, and they erected city-states. Okay, so civilization was being built, and what we also going to find, imperialism is being built. All right, he was a mighty man, and we're going to, as we study, we're going to find this is actually the growth of post-flood imperialism. Now, it's something else I want us to look at in Genesis. If we go right over to 11, we realize that Nimrod and the order of Nimrod, or some may say the body of Nimrod, which very well may, which is revealed in Sumer itself, is a succession of kings, rebels, starting with one, the son of Cush, but it was a succession of rebels. Now, we're going to put names on them a little later, but right now, the Hebrew writers identifying them as rebels and mighty men. They are rebelling against the order that the Creator was establishing in the beginning. And when we're saying order, we argue, unless you understand the order of the Creator from a social political perspective, it's going to be very difficult for some to understand the antagonism. What happened? See, empire, people might not even think of empire and all of the doctrines and ideologies that binds empire as religion. You see, so, and they will not think of the empire and all of its system of beliefs, which brings empire into existence, is a rebelling against the social order of equity and justice in which the Creator was establishing. See, we're going to find that Genesis in the Hebrew Bible teaches us that man was to have dominion over the earth, not dominion over one another. So soon as men began to have dominion over one another, they began to rebel against the social order of the Creator. And this idea came from another world, but that other world was pre-flood, and we will find it with Cain. All right, but as I said, we deal with that in other discussions. Now, the rebellion, what happens here? Well, they're going to build a tower. Let's go into Genesis 11. According to social sciences, the tower itself is the concentration of political power. The tower itself is like the nucleus of civilization. And so we're looking at the concentration of power, the concentration of wealth, a centralization of wealth. So therefore, normally with civilizations, they will have the tower or the ziggurat. The tower was a political, a political infrastructure, just like the Hebrew temple. All right. Now, this building of the tower was to bring the world to these new ideas. That's what I'm arguing here. Okay. Just like people talk about a one world government, well, the tower also represented the concentration or the centralization to draw men to this new form of civilization. Now, we go here to 11, Genesis 11 and 1. It says, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And this is what we find, that the order of Nimrod began to establish civilization in the land of Shinar, the mighty one. He began to establish civilization in the land of Shinar. The building of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, and Akkad, and Kelna in the land of Shinar. So the Bible, if you notice, it's not giving us ages. It's not giving us time lengths. It's explaining a situation, what began to happen in the earth. It's rapidly making its way to Abraham, because Abraham is to be brought in the very next chapter. And the Bible will begin to use Abraham narrative to actually be an antagonist to overthrow the order in which we're about to learn about now, or the religion which we're about to learn about now. So this Babel found in the plain of Shinar. Well, if we notice here the engineering, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and they dwelt there. Verse 3, and they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime had they for mortar. See, so they already equipped with skill. It's not telling you how long this process is. You understand me? Sometimes we can assume it, but it's not telling you how long this is before Nimrod began to build his kingdom. And then he's going to have successors, not children of his own, according to some records, but they're going to have successors to continue this work. And ultimately, what's going to happen is that the city-states will be divided. And this idea of one central concentration of power will be thwarted. All right, so that's it in a nutshell so far. But now we're reading about the rebellion. Verse 4, and they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So they wanted civilization, one civilization with a concentration of power. And this concentration of power looked very much like we had looked at in the past discussions. The social pyramid. We're actually going to find out where Egypt learned his religion from. We're going to learn that old time religion going all the way back to Sumer hasn't changed today. The prophet argued, has a nation changed their gods, which are yet no gods? It's in comparison to the God of heaven, they are nothing. But they still follow the order of the rulers and their doctrines to this very day. And they're not aware of it because to them, religion is something other than politics. To build a city and to build a tower. Let us make a name for ourselves. Verse 5, and Jehovah came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And Jehovah said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they began to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down there, confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Didn't tell you how long that process was. Before they began to have disagreements. So they wanted to build a one world government. We're going to find out what it was built upon, what religion it was built upon, and they began to have disagreement. Thus, city-states were erected, separate city-states. Verse 8, so the Lord or Jehovah scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound their language, and all of the earth, confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did Jehovah scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So then was the scattering. There is a new builder, which are drawing men together now, the master builder. And his order or his body isn't the body of the rebel of Nimrod, but this is the order and the body of the priest, of the high priest, after the order of Melchizedek, king of justice, king of peace, a whole different religion. And many people don't know how to get to that religion today, but hopefully our discussions can help a bit. Now, let's begin to look at this. He scattered them. So in doing this as an example, we're going to give you examples of the different variations of history. The creation are going to be varied from different city-states. They're literally going to have they're going to have ideological differences. So yeah, you're going to get all of these different, just like they may search the world and they say such Sumer has a flood account. Egypt has a flood account. China has a flood account. Yeah, of course they will. But they all have different variations that they begin to have ideological differences. And oftentimes these ideological differences and separation happen among men because of selfishness. It happens among men because of pride, the pursuit of power, you see. So the enterprise was being established under the Babylonian or Sumerian religion was bound to fail from the beginning. So let's analyze a bit of it. First, we have heard people talk about the gods of Sumer. Now, I want you to go to Romans chapter 1. The apostle Paul Saul is going to argue a point that is valid today, and that its validity holds even to the most ancient time, even before Greece. Because when we're looking at Greece, we're looking at the embodiment of Sumer. We're looking at the embodiment of Egypt. Right? That's what people say the Greeks learned from the Egyptians. The Egyptians in Sumer, they had one knowledge source. So this argument in which Saul is about to bring to the table is going to be essential, because remember, when Saul is making his argument, he is speaking during the time of the height of the Greco-Roman civilization. The Western world today argues they were the beginning of civilization. So they patterned their world after the Greeks and the Romans. But actually, the Greeks and Romans were patterned after Egypt and Sumer. So we actually have the same thing today. What we find in the Greco-Roman world is the same thing that was taught in Sumer. You see, and we began to develop a lot of the ways. Like God willing, we're going to deal with another discussion on has the Western so-called Christian turned Yeshua ben David, his teachings, into idolatry in the form of hero worship. The Creator didn't send Yehoshua ben David to be celebrated only as a hero. You see, he sent Yeshua ben David to be the beginning of the agent of change. See, people, they glorify in the person and they have turned the person into a hero, just like the Sumerians. But they haven't listened to the spirit of the person to be obedient to the works of the person, which is the agent of change. So that's why they run around with a cross, pictures, and all of these other things, because they actually have descended into hero worship. They speak of Yehoshua ben David, but they don't do what Yehoshua ben David said do. All right. So most high willing, we're going to address that. But I want to show you that what Saul is explaining here in Romans, the first chapter, and the people following after the pattern of Sumer, we have developed and picked up many of its ways, and we don't even realize because they just come so natural. You see, we think our ideas are just from us. No, they're not. Our ideas been given to us. Our ideas are shaped by the knowledges we receive. And so therefore it's important that we definitely search things out diligently. Romans, the first chapter, this is what it says. The Apostle Saul was arguing in Romans, the first chapter, and I will begin reading at verse 18. And I want you to notice this very carefully. Romans chapter 1 and 18. It says, for the wrath of Elohim is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. Now, this is a condemnation to not just the ancient civilization of Sumer, but also the civilization in which Cain erected. The word for unrighteousness here is the synonym English translation would be injustice. The wrath of God is against all ungodliness and injustice. Now watch with this injustice, because injustice is ungodliness. You understand me? If the persons who sit in their assemblies isn't speaking for justice, then they are the agents of injustice. Just like I would hear sometimes people, they get on and they talk about how they want to sanitize capitalism. Capitalism isn't half bad. You trying to clean up the devil's religion. It's impossible. It cannot be cleaned. It is inherently evil. And the reason why people follow it is because they don't know about it. You understand? In one sense, they want to talk about helping people. And then in another sense, they sit up here condoning the capitalist structure. But they want to change it. You know, they just want to change the name, you know, but it's still the same the way it operates. It's normally the arguments from petty capitalists, those who just want a piece of the capitalist pie. It was the same argument back during the days of Rockefeller, where they wanted the United States to pass certain laws, you know, laws that break up monopolies and stuff like that, to try to regulate the market so small time capitalists can have a piece of it too. It's a wealth of history behind it, and I'm telling you, it's nothing up. It's just simply from the damn devil. It cannot be reformed. It cannot be sanitized. And for people In order for you to understand that what I'm saying isn't my emotion, I'm not telling you about rhetoric. I am telling you the actual facts of how it works. How it works. If you just study the name itself, you would know that is of the devil. Now, the wrath of God is revealed against all ungodliness and injustice. Period. Now, notice what else happens here. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness or injustice of men who hold or restrain the truth in injustice. The truth of God is bound in injustice. And that's what people want to sanitize the society, the present day society, to make it a little bit, so a few more people can make a little bit more wealth. They still bind in the truth of the Creator. And we have other teachers to continue this argument. Now watch what happens. The truth is being bound by unrighteousness. To further understand Saul's argument, I think it will be helpful for us to look into what we're going to look at pertaining to the old time religion. Verse 19. Because that which may be known of Elohim is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. What did he show them? For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. Men understood about the things that they had seen, the forces, the mysterious forces in the earth that they call nature. They seen the cycles and understood and began to understand from the ancients the mysteries of the earth itself and its mysteriousness. God has showed it unto them. The invisible things from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power. Not only did they begin to understand the foundations of the earth and the universe, they also began to understand his eternal power and Godhead or God nature. See, everything is built on equity. Everything, this entire earth, this entire universe is established of justice, harmony, balance. Everything, that is the principle of the universe, justice and equity. You will never see the stars robbing another. The sun will never try to usurp authority over the moon, nor the moon usurp authority over the sun. The earth keeps at its axis and its tilts in its proper seasons. Everything functions on this earth according to this divine order. And men begin to see it. And they begin to learn the nature and the power of the Elohim or the Yehovah. It was clearly seen. But watch what happened. Because that when they knew Elohim, they glorified him not as Elohim. Neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became as fools. This began to happen post-flood with the Great Rebellion. We're going to show you that this also, not only just in Greece, but Saul is running the history back even to where the Greece civilization really found its footing. It all began to fall apart after they began to depart from the teachings of Noah and Shem. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. They left the teachings of justice, and then they began to restrain the truth of God by way of injustice. Remember, Noah, as a political figure, was a figure of equity and justice. He was righteous or justice just before the Creator. But then what did men do? Verse 23, they changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man and to birds and to four-footed beasts and creeping things. Wherefore Elohim also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own flesh, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of Elohim into a lie. Their religion they established changed the truth of Elohim into a lie, and they began to worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, who was blessed forever. What did they begin to do? They changed the truth of God into a lie. They began to make images. They changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into images made like unto corruptible man. This is very important to know. That's where we're going to get into understanding exactly about the Anunnaki and the Igigi. Now watch how this works. Who is the Anunnaki? If we look into Britannica.com, Anunnaki, Sumerian inscription from the Temple of Nippur. Anunnaki, also called Anuna. Anunnaki, also spelled Anunnaki or Anunnaki or Anunnaku. Class of gods within the ancient Mesopotamian pantheon. The precise meaning of the term is what? Princely seed in Sumerian. We're not talking about aliens. We're talking about the rise of a class, the Great Rebellion, when the order of Nimrod began to disrupt the order of justice and equity, and he began to establish the religion of empire. Inequitable distribution, a concentration of wealth and power signified by the tower and the civilization, the city. And this will cause the wealth of the earth, the wealth of all of the resources to be concentrated into the hands of a few, and the vast majority will be, as Marduk argued, or as the myth argued pertaining to Marduk, under the Babylonian city-state, savage man who will serve the Anunnaki and the Igigi, or the gods. But Anunnaki is princely seed in Sumerian. It remains ill-defined, as the number of these gods and their names and their functions vary according to the limited historical text scholars have recovered, because they actually change with different city-states. We should expect the change. You see, when Sumer fell and Babylon began to rise, then it was no longer Anu who was the king of heaven and earth. It was Marduk. See, there was changes. Why? Why was there war? Why was there contention? Why was there different ideologies? Because the Creator sent the spirit down, and this spirit arises because they become Satan to each other. They begin to find that the spirit of autonomy and rebellion and the lust for power and wealth, that was the reason why they wanted to build the city. They find that the selfish nature in which they were gendering will cause division, and people broke apart. And you'll find the same phenomenon today. You find different people, different organizations, and whether they're cities or whether they're so-called Western religions, when there's too much pride there, it breaks apart. And you have different ideologies that breaks apart. Some of the ideologies can be built on truth. Oftentimes, it's because of pride and arrogance, and things begin to be altered. So we see the same phenomenon. It just happens. But once you yield yourself and humble yourself to truth and begin to eliminate being the big I, then you begin to find yourself under the administration of equity and justice, or after the pattern of Melchizedek, the priest and king of justice, like the Hebrews king. He wasn't to exalt himself. He was to be just like his brethren. He wasn't to have dominion over another man. See, when you decide to have dominion over another man, you're going to cause rebellions. This is an ancient knowledge. Philo talks about the same thing. When a man decides to have dominion and rule over another man, you're going to cause problems. And this will begin to happen with the Great Rebellion. But we have the princely seed, the Anunnaki, who came into existence. Now, I'm bringing in the players. Now, one player is the Anunnaki. Then we have another player, the Igigi. Some say the Igigi. The Igigi and the Igigi. Now, the term, and this is out of this website, ORAC, ORACC .museum.upenn.education. I think it's University of Penn State, if I'm not mistaken. But you could probably find it by typing in its title, Ancient Mesopotamian Gods and Goddesses. Here is going to give us an example of the Igigi. The Anunnaki is the princely seed. The Igigi is who? The term Igigi is first attested in texts from the Old Babylonian period and only occurs in Akkadian context. A Sumerian logographic equivalent of the term Igigi or Igigi is Nun-Galine or Nun-Galini, to be translated as the great princes or the great sovereigns. So when we're looking at the Igigi and the Anunnaki, we're looking at a higher class of men that wanted to establish a city and the concentration of power. Thus, the Bible argues it was the Great Rebellion, and the order of Nimrod was given birth. These are people from other planets. These are men who began to assume the role of the top notch or the top block on the social pyramid. Now, we have them as players, but remember, they began to be deified as well. Legends and myths behind them. What did Saul say? This has a lot to do with the injustice holding the truth of God, because the truth of God has to do with justice. And you have so many religious people today, they don't even, they can go years without mentioning the word justice. And then even if you talk about the word justice, they don't even know what it means. They haven't studied it. They don't think it's needful to study it. And because of this, you don't look into the social political realm. You think now you're looking for aliens and people coming from different planets, and people 200 feet tall, people 40 feet tall, giants going to come and eat you up, and all this other stuff, the space opening up and demons being released from CERN and everybody, all of this madness. Solomon said it's nothing new under the sun. Let's get our head out of the myth and the allegory and understand the truths, and then maybe we can assess where we are and break loose from hero worship and begin to be agents of change. Yes, the Igigi is here today. Yes, the Anunnaki is here today. You need to know why they were considered as serpents. Not literally. Igigi, Anunnaki. We want to bring it now. I want to show you something. Now, remember, the creator had revealed, we have the great princes, the Igigi, and we have the Anunnaki, which is the princely seed. And it depends on which city state you go to find out which one ruled over the other. Sometimes the Anunnaki had the rules, sometimes the Igigi. We're going to read it, so we'll show it to you. We'll show it to you. And look at this. So the city states were broken up. Here we have world history of Babylonian world. This is out of the World History Encyclopedia. And I wanted to bring something else in because remember, what Saul was arguing is important for us to lay this groundwork as we move forward. He was talking about the power and the glory of God began to be objectified. If you simplify it, Romans 1 was talking about the power of God being objectified, either as a man, beast. But what people need to realize is that the Elohim is a unified force. And this unified force, when we, let's say, for example, we look at the handiwork of the creator. The creator don't have hands like we do, but we use our hands to create. His handiwork created the sun. We see the object made. But there were forces behind it, invisible forces, to hold it together. You see, there are invisible forces there, laws, if you will, of the universe that causes its heat, its elements, its laws in place for electromagnetic energies, its laws in place for gravity. All of these things work together to create the present reality we see today, but they're invisible. You don't see gravity. You see the effects of gravity. You don't see the law that draws all of the cells and molecules together to make trees and water or H2O and all this. You don't see it. But you see it's been divided. Water, land, trees, different animals. You see, there is a power at work to bring all of that together. Well, you don't see the power, or Elohim, plural. You only see what it have brought forth. Now, a map illustrating the emergence of the Sumerian civilization around 6000 BC from a collection of city-states on the floodplains of the southern Mesopotamia along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in the area that was to later become the Akkadian Empire and then Babylonia. We're going to follow it down because the beginning of the kingdom of Nimrod, the rebels, started there in Shinar. And that's why it's argued that this isn't just one man, but this is a order, if you will, of men who follow the same pattern. Take note that where the first civilization post-flood was found, because something else was revealed to them. Why do men know about the flood account and the creation? Different cultures. Because the glory of God and his invisible power was revealed to them. But then they begin to do something. Why is this necessary that I'm bringing this part in? Because, brothers and sisters, the idea of the Anunnaki and the Igigi to center their sciences not only in social stratification, but the social stratification was a feature of justifying their control over resources. So they became the messenger of the gods. Well, when they became the messenger of the gods, then all the gods had made rightfully belonged to the Anunnaki or the Igigi. In other words, this was an early primitive form of men seizing upon the means of production. All right, watch how this plays out. Now, when we're looking at this, the glory of God began to be objectified. This was necessary for the Great Rebellion. So they will begin to create doctrines around the sciences. So look at Anu. Anu, the Sumerian personification of the sky. So we see the sky here. Well, the Sumerians called it Anu. The Greeks call it Zeus. Later on, it was Marduk who came from the skies, but Marduk was a real man. So Anu was a personification of the sky. The sky was very important because it's a part of the universe and it is essential in vegetation. So Anu was the personification of the sky, the father of Enlil and or Enki. We'll get to them later, but I want to look at Ninlil, the Sumerian personification of grain and vegetation. Okay, so if we look at this, we have this other a slide where we have the skies and we have vegetation. This will be Anu and Ninlil. Personification of the glory of God and all that he had made. You have turned them into creatures, into men, or they personified. Now, the personification of these gods who created the skies, Ea, who caused water, and he is the so-called god of water in Babylon, but we're going to look at some others briefly for tonight's session. I just want to lay this groundwork here. It's important for them to establish this to justify their reigns over the concentration of wealth. Agrarian societies, the sky and the land and vegetation is essential. These are the means. The sky is essential in producing vegetation. Vegetation and the sustaining of cattle, bringing forth food to eat, timber to build. Well, we're looking at the personification of the means of production. But not only that, we're learning also that the early kings would use this ideology to justify why they have sole control of the means of production. Pretty much like what John Locke began to teach. The poor, you stay in your place. John Rockefeller and all of them, they believe the same thing. Once they assume the roles of the Anunnakis, then they made sure that we were the ones to labor for the gods. Now, before we get into Mami, we're going to look at Mami later, because again, these different deities, so-called deities or personifications or anthropomorphisms of the phenomenons of nature or the glory of God, they begin to objectify them. Remember, this isn't for nothing. Remember, this is for the right to seize upon the means of production. Now, what we have next, I wanted to just show you how it works. Look what we have here. We have at the top, we're not going to look at Lamu and Lahamu yet. We want to look at their parents. Now, remember where Babylon and Sumer was beginning to be established in the land of Shinar? Right here in the Fertile Crescent, they called it, at where the Euphrates River and the Tigris River meets. All right, keep that in mind to understand what we're looking at here. What we have, brothers and sisters, a phenomenon that takes place. In the beginning, the Creator said that his spirit worked and moved upon the waters, the deep. Okay? So the spirit is his breath. The wind moved upon the deep, according to the Hebrew Bible. Well, they have the same analogy. In the beginning, there was water, Apsu and Tiamat. They had children. Who were the children? According to Genesis, the dry land appeared, or land appeared from the water. Well, that's who Lamu and Lahamu. They're actually a personification of the land. So Lamu is like slime or mud or silt. The female Lahamu perhaps means the same thing, silt. Well, what does the silt do? It makes land. That's when land began to be developed. Because we're looking at how the ruling class began to use their ideology to seize upon the means of production of earth and its resources, and to convince man they have that right. Now, we also have Kishar, who come forth. He's the whole earth, or the horizon, which you will see in the back. The horizon. And Anu begins to be the sky. Now, Apsu is what? It's the sweet primeval waters, the ancient waters, aka lakes. So we have salt water, which is Tiamat, your oceans and seas. Then we have waters, fresh waters. That would be Apsu. Now, when these two come together, now what is silt? Because they children produce silt. In other words, Apsu and Tiamat, out of them came forth land. Eventually, mud and silt dries and produce a fertile land, like the Fertile Crescent. What phenomenon is happening at the Fertile Crescent? Salt water and fresh water meets. When salt water and fresh water meets, it produces something, an estuary. Apsu and Tiamat produce fertile lands, and not just that, out of them comes forth life. So what we're looking at is the science of the Creator, these phenomenons that he put in his power. Yes, in the deep, there was salt and fresh water. Out of that came forth land, fertile land, to produce the Garden of Eden even. But they begin to personify this. Silt, which would be Lahamu and Lamu. What is it? According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, loose sedimentary material with rock particles, usually 1/20th of a millimeter or less in diameter. Also, silt, soil containing 80% or more of such silt and less than 12% of clay, a deposit of sediment, as by a river. So this is the development, or the settlement begins to produce land. Now watch this. We're looking at estuaries. Brother, why are you talking about some estuary? Because this is a part of politics. And what we're looking at is the development of the means of production. In the beginning, the Creator began to create a world that will produce everything we need. And then after the Great Rebellion, and this is what we have here. We actually have fresh water meeting salt water. These are phenomena that happen on the globe. So the Sumerians will call this Apsu and Tiamat. What are estuaries? Well, an estuary is an area where a freshwater river or stream like the Euphrates or the Tigris meets the ocean, whether it's the Indian Ocean or the Mediterranean Sea, right? When fresh water and seawater combine, the water becomes brackish or slightly salty. Many plant and animal species thrive in estuaries. The calm waters provide a safe area for small fish, shellfish, migrating birds, and shore animals. The waters are rich in nutrients such as plankton and bacteria, decomposing plant matter called detritus provides food for many species. So this phenomenon, the Sumerians began to objectify and say there was the gods that created this. There's powers that created it, but as Saul said, they began to turn it into men, and animals, and creatures. Let's learn a little bit more about the estuary, because this was the foundation of the plains of Shinar. Estuaries are excellent sites for community living. Watch where this goes. They provide, and this is out of National Geographic's online. Estuaries, if you look it up, okay? Estuaries provide fresh water for drinking and hygiene. Access to both rivers and oceans help the development of trade and communication. In fact, the earliest civilization in the world developed around estuaries. Guess who we talking about? The city-states of Sumer. One city-state they're going to bring up is Ur. This is where Abraham come from. So this idea of the estuaries, they began to make shrouded in their myths of the creation story of the birth of the civilization of Sumer. From Apsu and Tiamat, it produced a fertile land where all life thrives. And the sky became a deified, or should I say objectified. The horizon objectified. Heaven and earth began to be objectified. And it was the powers of the waters that created the mysterious power of vegetation to grow and produce vegetation and food and sustenance. These mysterious powers for the glory of God. They objectified it and they wanted to seize upon it. Not for everyone, but the order of Nimrod, the rebels, they rebelled against the order of the Creator. No equitable distribution of these resources. We, the gods, are going to seize upon it. And we're going to make man. And they're going to labor for the gods. And this is what we find in the Akkadian myths. All right. Estuaries were places of thriving life and sustainability. The earliest civilization in the world developed around estuaries. In what is now Iraq, developed around 38 BC near the estuary of the Euphrates River, where it met the Persian Gulf. Was a sophisticated urban area with a population of more than 60,000 at its height. See, we're going back further than We're going back to Sumer. Came later, the beginning of the kingdoms. See, he didn't tell you how long this process was happening in Genesis. But was one of the prosperous city-states with their version of the creation, the gods, the Anunnaki, or the princely seed and the princely rule. Its estuary was the most important port on the Persian Gulf. All ships carrying trade goods from places such as India and the Arabian Peninsula had to pass through The estuaries, wetlands, and floodplains provided a rich source of wild game and allowed for the development of irrigation and agriculture, water and earth. The water would be Apsu and Tiamat. Agriculture came forth from their children, according to Sumer. Okay. And that will be the development of Sut or fertile land. So, as Saul said, in the ideology of the gods, the glory of God, they became as fools by changing the glory of God into corruptible things. There's powers that created the waters. The waters themselves are nothing but a byproduct of the handiwork of the invisible power. But they began to objectify. This is important. I want to show you why. Now, for today's session, I wanted to give this background. And I want to go into an account briefly of Capital Volume 1. Capital Volume 1, Chapter 7, page 283. You say, brother, what in the world are you talking about? See, when we're looking at the Bible and history from a social political perspective, we're looking at the development of a class society. And this class society have used or created an ideology that will give them the autonomy to rule over the means of production, earth, resources. That is the means of production. And therefore, the Anunnaki and the Igigi or the Igigi, what they will do, they will claim to be descendants from these powers, to be rightful ruler and owner. In other words, they're going to seize the opportunity to possess the earth. This is the religion of Sumer. This is the religion today. The Western concept of religion, this idea of Western Christianity, it have changed the teachings. It has changed Yeshua ben David into hero worship. The Western Christianity today is pretty much hero worship. They don't do the works. They just adore the object. And they, in their ideology, have been taught that the gods who rule the earth have been put there by God. If you're poor and you're destitute, you're dispossessed, that's how God wanted you to be. So it's still the same. The devastating effects is still the same. Now, in order to understand this idea, briefly, as we look at the gods, what they represent, briefly here, objects of nature, these cycles of nature, when the sun, so-called deity, represented as, say, Tammuz. We're going to look at him in another name among the kings of Sumer. And his mother/wife is agriculture. Well, when Tammuz died, vegetation died. So if you look at in the book of Ezekiel, when they were weeping for Tammuz, Ezekiel told you the month. He said it was the 6th month. That's roughly corresponds with September, August, September, the end of summer. And there they seen the women weeping for Tammuz because now the days are getting shorter. Vegetation's beginning to die off. You get your last crop. And Tammuz, so-called, according to their tradition, dies to be resurrected next spring, when everything began to grow again. So they began to follow these customs and they began to objectify the phenomenons of nature. And this is in conjunction with their ideology to possess these phenomena. And when I say they, I mean the Anunnaki. Who are they? Again, just for the record, the princely seed. Who are the Igigi? The great princes. The great princes and the princely seed, the ruling class. So with this outline, this will probably, hopefully this will give us some background as we move forward with this. All right. Now, like I said, I want to go to show you something here so we can understand what's happening scientifically, if you will, or should I say, according to knowledge. What do we have going on here? In their system of beliefs, they, the Sumerians, established the princely seed or kings. Now, here in Capital Volume 1, we want to look at something pertaining to nature. Something very important pertaining to nature. It says, labor. This is chapter 7, the labor process and the valorization process. Now, just bear with me a bit. Labor is, first of all, a process between man and nature. A process by which man, through his own actions, mediates, regulates, and controls the metabolism between himself and nature. So this objectification of nature and the ruling class of Sumer teaching the people an ideology that the gods, aka the powers of nature, have endowed upon them sole authority. So they're in control of nature. Only thing the Anunnaki and the Igigi needs is labor. Thus, they can establish their empires. Through his own actions, man's labor mediates, regulates, and controls the metabolism between himself and nature. He confronts the materials of nature as a force of nature. He sets in motion the natural forces which belong to his own body. That is the invisible power that causes us to be mobile, that causes us to be alive, animated. You see, that's why Marx will argue the labor power. We see the physical man, but there's a power holding our cells together. There's a power that's causing the gut bacteria to be healthy and to benefit the body. Blood flowing, heart beating, right? The thoughts process. There's a power behind the physical manifestation of the human. And that's why Marx is arguing it's this labor power that is used to manipulate, or should I, or as he said here, to control and use nature for his benefits. He, again, sets in motion the natural forces which belong to his own body, his arms, legs, heads, and hands, in order to appropriate the materials of nature in a form adapted to his own needs. Now, how would the Anunnaki use nature? How would they tap into nature for the forces of nature and all of its resources to be beneficial to their own needs? Labor. Labor. Who are they going to get the labor from? Man, and whom they're going to create. Now, I'm going to read, let's say, another excerpt, and we're going to close for tonight's discussion. We're going to pick this back up. I wanted to give this background first as we enter into Sumer. Now, I want to read out of a text entitled, in fact, I'm going to read two excerpts. One here I'm going to read from is the gods of the Gentiles. And he's going to make it plain in this text. I believe this was written in 1928. Lords of the Valley, chapter 2, Lords of the Valley. It reads, the first political picture of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, which is an estuary, vegetation and everything began to grow. It was very fertile. The first political picture of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, it will be remembered, shows a number of city-states. Yes, because their enterprise was broken up and they had divided up into city-states. According to the Bible, the Great Rebellion, the Creator divided them, and the ideologies have a lot of similarities, but there's enough differences to separate them. There was a number of city-states. Upon the administrative economy of the city-state seems to have modeled the earliest ascertainable concept of the divine economy. That's right. The resources of the earth belonging to the princes and the seed of the princes. They inherited because of the divine economy. The gods give them the wealth, aka the resources. And analogs, as analogs, notice that analog is something comparable to another. So as analogs, look what's being compared. That is to say, the patetsi, aka, it says here in parentheses, the city ruler. Now watch this. As analogs, that is to say, the city ruler, the ruler of the city-state, and his officials stood the city god. The city ruler and his officials, as analogs, they stood as the city god. Proper and his, the city god proper and his subordinate deities. The subordinate deities would be the officials. The city god proper would be the patetsi, or the city ruler. We're not looking at people from a different planet. We're looking at the establishment of social hierarchy. The gods that created the universe, or the power, Elohim, that created the universe, as Saul said, man began to, they seen the power of God, but they rebelled. And then they began to hide or hold the truth of God by what? Injustice. Therefore, the patetsi, or the city ruler, became the city's god. The powers endowed upon them to take the resources, and the officials, the subordinate deities. They were the deities under the city god. Here we are looking into the establishing of the religion of Nimrod, truly. harnessing of nature, deifying nature, deifying the king, or should I say objectifying nature, turning it into objects. These objects, according to their ideology, Apsu, Tiamat, they endowed the kings with sole authority. These kings will begin to use the earth and its resources to benefit them. And the only thing that they will need from thence is labor power. Now, I'm going to read this excerpt, and we're going to go back over it again, but I'm going to just say it for this session. This is out of Babylonian and Assyrian religion. Babylonian and Assyrian religion. Chapter 2, cultural background of the religion. It reads, page 16. In this land of Sumer and Akkad, the Sumerians had built up an elaborate and advanced culture whose basis was agriculture, right? That's Apsu and Tiamat coming together to produce the soot. Remember, at the estuary, their children was Lamu and Lahamu, which produces fertile soil, deposits of sediment, silt. Okay, you found the same thing in Egypt. The Nile, at its estuary, when it overflows, it will produce silt, soil for their civilization. All right. So instead of glorifying a one grand power, they objectify the powers that causes vegetation to grow, that form the water and brought forth its molecules and its properties. These invisible powers that brought this about, they just began to focus on the object of water, the object of soil, the object of the man. But it is silt that Apsu, saltwater Tiamat, and freshwater Apsu produced. Okay? Now, in this land of Sumer and Akkad, the Sumerians have built an elaborate and advanced culture whose basis was agriculture, a fact which determined the character of the religion. And upon this foundation, the structure of Sumerian society rested. It rested upon agriculture. Well, watch this. The unit of Sumerian political organization was the city-state, ruled over by a priest king or patassi. We read out of another account, but it was ruled over by a priest king who bore the title Ishaku, the Semitic form of the older Sumerian patetsi, which we read earlier, which is city ruler. In contemporary documents, he, which is the patetsi or the Ishaku or the priest king, Anunnaki or Igigi, in contemporary documents, he is described as the tenant farmer of the god. What was the tenant farmer? The tenant farmer is the one who has sole authority over the farm. So what they're saying is all over the land, it's the city ruler who have sole authority over the land. And that means him and his officials have sole authority over the means of production. And that's the way it is today. The gods still seek to possess the means of production. They'll let you open up your little petty businesses, but until you realize that no matter what type of entrepreneur you call yourself, you're still at the mercy of the gods who possess the rubber plantations, the gods who dig and possess the petroleum, the iron ore, the copper, those gods who, or the ruling class, aka, who possess the means of production, the timber. You see? And it's the same condition. And as long as they could teach us to worship Jesus like a hero and not understand that Yehoshua ben David was the administrator of change. That's why he said flesh and blood don't profit nothing. He said you could speak a word against the Son of Man, but don't speak against the Spirit. It's the Spirit that rests upon men, that changes the world. It's the Spirit that causes men to smite the nations with the breath of the lips to bring forth justice and verdicts of justice to the poor and the oppressed. If you reject that Spirit, there is none forgiveness. But people don't recognize that Spirit. They just focus on the person, the object. Just like he looked at him, well, how are we going to eat your flesh and drink your blood? Flesh and blood don't profit nothing. I'm not talking about the object. But the finagling of the gods have caused the people to look at the object and not look at the Spirit. Therefore, the oppression and the worship and the religion of the gods still exist. But once those in this dispensation follow the ancestors of righteousness and begin to be agents of change, then they will be another force in this dispensation, in this time. Another force to deal death blows to the religion of Sumer, Nimrod, and Cain. This idea of the princes and the rulers becoming the tenant farmer or of the god, it continues in this passage. He, speaking of the ruler of Sumer, he was supposed to hold the lease of his land direct from the principal god of his city. And his tenure was supposed to be renewed yearly at the New Year festival. Festival of the New Year, all of the people get together to rejoice and to inaugurate the ruling class again, to possess the means of production while the people labor. As a representative of the god, he was the head of a body of officials which controlled every aspect of communal life. And it has been said that he united in his person the prestige attached to God's tenant with an undivided power as supreme lawgiver, judge, and commander. According to Sumerian ideas or their religion, a system of beliefs, according to the Sumerian ideas as represented in the early kings list, which we're going to look at, God willing, in the future, kingship came down from heaven. Now, you see where it says here a communal? It wasn't communal as you know it today. It wasn't communist communal. I'm going to read this excerpt here. And in part, page 19. The community was divided into three classes. First came the Emelu, or aristocracy, composed of the king, the nobles, the priesthood, government officials, and the regular soldiers. All right. The second class consisted of merchants, farmers, artisans, just like we read in Egypt, wasn't it? And other free men of various occupations. These were known as the Mushkenu. See, we're not looking at aliens. We're looking at social stratification. Or, as it went back and forth, the Anunnaki and the Igigi. The third class upon which the structure of society rested. And we're looking at their system of beliefs of Sumer. The third class upon which the structure of city rested, as it did later in Greece and Rome. That's why I read Paul, because what he said applies to our time and even the ages before him. The third class upon which the structure of the civilization rested, as it did later in Greece and Rome, consisted of slaves, either those who had been captured in war or those who had been purchased or become enslaved through debt or other causes. The three classes: the Anunnaki, the Igigi, and savage man, according to the Akkadian. We're going, God willing, when we read the Akkadian myth, we're going to review this again. So I'm reading this now for today's session, but we're going to analyze this some more. Three classes: the gods and savage man, to labor for the gods. This is how their religion was structured. Their system of beliefs, which they hold to with ardor, scrupulous dedication. The whole structure of Sumer rested upon the exploitation of people. Why? As Marx said, it takes labor power to transform nature into useful things, things that you want. So this is our beginning of dealing with the old time religion, to show you we've been defrauded to believe that religion is restricted to Hindus, Muslims, so-called Baptists and Methodists. That's just a small feature of religion. Capitalism is a religion. Imperialism is a religion. The entire social structure, which lives and thrives off social stratification or a caste system or a class system, this is truly religion. And this is the old time religion that can be proven rebelled against the initial social order that was being established by Adam and the social order that was being established by Noah. And this is the social order in which Yehoshua ben David is bringing men back to: the social order of Noah, which was righteous before Elohim, and the social order of Adam and Seth. Politics. And as long as they could believe that long as they can convince you to believe that there's some 200-300 foot men running around tall as a damn Statue of Liberty, or they can convince you to believe that there's people running around here 30-40 foot tall, or they're yet to come. I'm here to tell you, when the hell you think somebody 30 or 40, somebody 20, 15, 20 feet tall, they're no longer a human? What are you talking about? So you waiting for some creatures tall as the damn Statue of Liberty to come, or lizard people from another planet? That is what superstition have done. Hero worship of Yehoshua ben David, instead of following his teachings and his spirit to be agents of change to bring the world back to balance, you worship the damn object. A hippie on a stick. Cross around your neck. Who is that on your neck? They done a number on us. And some people are going to hold to this. But we are looking for those who are open to learn, and not just learn, but are willing to learn to be agents of change and work together cooperatively, because the new builder is bringing us together. And we are departing from the rebellion of the social concentration of wealth and power of the Tower of Rebellion, and the civilization in which this power and concentration of power was trying to bring men. We're turning away from it. The Creator confounded it, broke it apart, broke it into city-states, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. They can't get the tower built. There will never be a concentration or a harmony of this type of social system. But the Spirit been released on Pentecost to do the opposite, to draw men together after the order of Melchizedek, not after the order of Nimrod. We're going to close with this discussion. Most High willing, we're going to continue this. This was just an intro, so a lot of this we're going to review again, and God willing, take our time so we can analyze these things. But we brought just a few different players into play, something that you can work with. So as we move forward, God willing, we can start to understand what's happening here. So with that, I appreciate all who may have been on. I'm glancing over here a little bit and I see people on. We appreciate you all for coming out. And we're going to conclude our discussion for tonight. And God willing, we will resume dealing with old time religion, Sumer, old time religion, the Igigi, and the Anunnaki, so we can understand what this is about. I'm Brother Judah. God willing, we'll meet again. Peace and blessings to everyone who is sincerely searching.